Hey guys, thanks so much for tuning in. As always, our good friend Bix Weir is back to ring in 2015 with a silver and precious metals update. Bix, welcome back.
Thanks, Sean. I'm real excited about hitting the road, fighting these guys for 2015. I know everybody got tired of last year, so a new year, a new chance for us.
A new year, a new chance. Silver is up out of the gate, and we're seeing lots of news that suggests we've been right about our reasons for owning physical precious metals. Although the naysayers out there say that we've suckered them into buying precious metals. Bix, let me ask you this. When the U.S. economy is so bad that even lottery sales are collapsing, according to Zero Hedge, what do you make of the big picture, Bix, as it relates to us continuing to make the case that owning physical precious metals is a wise thing to do in a world of paper and crashing derivatives?
Well said. The reasons we got in haven't changed. The markets haven't changed. The supply-demand situation haven't changed. But also the rigging hasn't changed. And everybody who's down on silver and says it was a bad choice doesn't really understand what's going on as far as the market rigging, the manipulation, how much power these guys have, and whether or not they're ready to relinquish that power to a free market type situation. I think we're in a situation now where they can't relinquish it. If they do, it'll be a price spike, and everybody will put the flashlight on the CFTC and the banks and say, "Well, what happened? You said there was no rigging going on, and now we finally have a free market in silver, and the price has gone haywire." It's hard for them to end the rigging, so they just keep doing it until we hit that point where we all fall off the cliff.
Yeah, and when referring to the rigging, Bix, it's important to remind people of Charles Savoy's Silver Squelchers series. It's a must-read for anybody who wants the truth. There's a lot of people out there, Bix, that listen to these interviews and don't necessarily want the truth. Most of the listeners want the truth, not everyone. If you really want to know what's going on, check out the Silver Squelchers from Charles Savoy. And to that end, let's talk about Jack Lew and the demand for silver eagles. How do you think old Jack is feeling about what appears to be possibly, again, new record demand for silver eagles right out of the gate here in January?
I love it. I'm a gigantic fan of silver eagles for 1,000 different reasons. One of the biggest reasons is that they are actually U.S. mint printed money as opposed to Federal Reserve notes. And everybody kind of overlooks that fact. But the U.S. Mint is the one who prints those or makes the eagles, and it is denominated in the U.S. dollar. So if the Federal Reserve note goes the way of the dodo bird, those eagles will still be there. The denomination of $1 will still be there. The value in physical silver will still be in each coin. I'm a big fan. And I think people are starting to catch on to the fact that silver eagles are a superior investment in silver. And I know what everybody says. They say, hey, the premiums are too high. Yes, the premiums are high, but there's a reason for that. And not only are the premiums high when you buy the coins, the premiums are high as well when you sell the coins. So you're going to get more for your silver if they're in the eagle form. But there are many reasons why silver eagles are, if you live in America, they're one of the best investments you can make on the silver front.
We posted a piece from you, I believe it was on Tuesday, in which you wrote why the U.S. is actively trying to destroy the dollar. It is interesting that as we see all of the printing happening, as we see wars without end, as we see us surpass an $18 trillion national debt and $200 trillion in unfunded liabilities, according to Lawrence Kotlikoff, it is curious to see them still making real money in the form of American silver eagles. That's a great point, Bix, and you're right. It is not mentioned enough. I forget about that a lot of times. I talk about the fact that they took all of the real precious metal, all of the real money out of our currency, out of our coins back in the late 60s, but then they re-implemented this program in the 80s with silver eagles, which are definitely real money. It's a great point.
There's some very significant things that happened in 1987, when the Silver Eagle program was begun, and it was actually started in a bill in Congress by none other than Barney Frank, who obviously came and went and has gone on to greener pastures. But there is a side of Barney Frank that knew what was going on with the banks. And I hate to say it again, and I always harp on this issue, that Alan Greenspan was also sworn in as the head of the Fed, back in 87, and they had the stock market crash in 87. Everything was gearing up for the crash in the markets and a return to gold and silver coin for the United States, and the bankers have been able to get, kind of weasel their way out of it every time ever since then. And the last time we were so close is in September, October of 2008, when Hank Paulson went in front of Congress and said basically, you got to bail us out. And I think we're getting closer and closer again to the next crash, and it's all the bubbles are blowing up higher and higher. The U.S. dollar bubble is just amazing right now. And the very moment that bubble pops, we're going to have the same type of situation. Someone's from the banks is going to go to Congress and say, hey, we need another bailout. That's going to be the big question. Will they bail them out, or will they say, no, we're done with you, and then let the chips fall where they may?
Bix, you have talked for quite some time about the fact that you believe that there are some good guys within government whose goal it is to crash the dollar and bring about the crash so that we can reset the system with constitutional money on constitutional principles. But, for so many of us who do like you, but have also been following along with the playbook of Kissinger and the New World Order powers, George Soros, the Pentagon's playbook, it just seems as though that is far-fetched at this point. And I want to call attention to the terror attack, which we believe to be a false flag in Paris with the Charlie Hebdo attack. I did a micro-documentary called False Flag 101, From Gladio to Hebdo. Why don't we talk a little bit about these false flags? We see cracks in the armor of the New World Order banking powers, and we see them trying desperately to keep nation states and allies in line, and that's my take on what went down in France. We saw France demanding that sanctions against Russia be ended for the good of the European Union, for the good of the world, essentially, for the good of the world economy and the European Union.
Let's look at the immediate prelude to the Charlie Hebdo, and that is the New Year's interview. This is a very important, major statement by President François Hollande, which has, of course, gotten lost in the hysteria now. And here's what he said. Russian President Putin does not want to annex eastern Ukraine. He has assured me of that. And he went on to say that the Western sanctions against Russia, allegedly based on the situation in Crimea and Donetsk and Lugansk, those sanctions should be lifted if progress is attained in resolving the Ukrainian crisis. The noise you hear in the background is the collapse of the U.S. British sanctions regime against Russia.
We see cracks in the armor of the New World Order, and what is their response? Roll out terror attacks, roll out false flags, roll out all of this draconian, horrible stuff in the effort to try to keep this thing stitched together. Do you think I'm on the right track, or am I wrong?
I think you're on the right track. The false flags are becoming so obvious for a few different reasons. One, I don't think the people who are executing them these days are as good as they used to be. But also, we didn't know as much 10, 20, 30, 40, 50 years ago. There were false flags going on all the time. You can go back in history, and every major event is most likely, if you did enough research, could turn out to be just a false flag, another false flag.
That's right. And just to interject, the Operation Gladio that went on from the 60s to the early 80s, I believe, those were false flag terror attacks carried out in Italy by NATO in collaboration with the CIA. So you're absolutely right. We know that these false flag terror attacks have been going on. It's just now that the world is waking up. Instead of just the well-informed and the intelligentsia, the world is waking up to these false flags.
I agree. But also, you got to remember that everybody with a cell phone is a little reporter out there in the street, and we're getting the tidbits of real information from these staged false flag alerts. You'll watch these things happen, and then within a couple of days, you'll see all these videos of some innocent bystander who pulled out their cell phone and took video of them staging the whole thing. It is amazing what they can't get away with anymore. And they're trying to do these false flags for their own purposes. The purpose of the France thing, all of a sudden Obama's going after ISIS again. And, it's all just meant to steer us in a certain direction. But there's so many people with cell phones, with access to the internet, with free and open media, that they can get the word out there. And it is growing and growing and growing. They're not getting away with as much as they used to. And one of the biggest things that I love to look at, and I used to do a lot of research on this, is going back in the history of the United States and all the assassinations and attempted assassinations of U.S. presidents. And it's so easy to find the connection to whoever shot the president. It always goes back to these banksters trying to get their way. And there's always a connection between the death of the president, who shot him, and who were they involved with, that gets back to the banking cabal. And that's what America should be really pissed about, is that they're messing with our country. They're messing with our liberty. They're messing with our freedom. That's what we have to fight against.
Yeah, it all goes back to the bankers. All wars are banker wars. And, in the CIA, in the JFK assassination, you can talk about the CIA, the Dulles brothers, Bush Sr., who then went on to be a director of the CIA and ultimately became the president of of these United States. And, of course, then his son became president. And now in this next election, they're going to push another son of Bush Sr. down the throats of the American people. And if you don't like that choice, well, here's Hillary Clinton. It's absolutely absurd. We live in an oligarchy, a fascist oligarchy, and it can't be more evident and it can't be any more clear than 2016 being offered the false choice of Hillary Clinton and Jeb Bush.
Yeah, but the reality is it hasn't changed in a long time. I mean, we just know about it now. Same thing was going on. You can go back as far as you want. Now, will it change? It'll change when we take the banking system out. When will that change? When the derivatives crash. When will the derivatives crash? They could crash any day. There's so much going on right now with the price of oil destroying the derivative books in Europe. It's unbelievable how many structured derivatives were linked to the price of oil. And we're just starting to see banks wobble, like Chartered Standard Bank. Yeah. Had some huge hits in oil. That is a key. One of the keys to taking down these bad guys is the low price in oil is wreaking havoc with their investments into oil companies, into derivatives related to oil. So it's kind of all coming to a head now with this obviously purposeful drive down in the price of oil, where they're running their derivatives, and they got Saudi Arabia to increase or not to cut production. It was right after John Kerry went over there. The thing about this oil situation, it's completely orchestrated, from the price on a daily basis to the physical inventories, the price on the COMEX. It's all orchestrated. It's been a plan in the U.S. for the last 6 months or so. When John Kerry went to Saudi Arabia, arranged some kind of deal with them. Nobody really knows what it was, but then all of a sudden the price of oil started collapsing, and the Saudis aren't going to cut back on production, and the COMEX derivatives are all being thrown at the price. They're driving the price lower for a purpose. One of the purposes is to hurt Putin. That's all they could do.
I thought the whole purpose of was to hurt Putin, but now to see these derivatives affecting the banks, and the banks are the bad guys, that can't be what they wanted, right?
Well, we don't know. A lot of these banks who were in the know might have been told, hey, we're going to drive the price of oil down. Once you put a bunch of shorts on this, on the COMEX, so you can cover your losses and things like that. Some of the banks obviously haven't. And that's, you can start seeing that with the Standard Chartered Bank. The thing that's going on that is really interesting is how far are they going to drive it down? And then what are the ramifications of this price dive? And what is it going to do to the oil mining investments? What's it going to do to the derivatives? And can the system sustain a long-term drop in oil prices? We used to say, yeah, lower oil prices are great for the consumer. Well, the people who run the financial institutions and the financial system don't give a hoot about the consumer. It's all about positioning. It's all about gaining control. And I believe it's going to be a huge backfire for those who think that driving the oil prices down is going to kick Putin out of power. I don't see that at all. Russia can shut their door any day they want. They can buy all the gold they want. They can buy all the silver they want on any day of the week. Walk away with all the gold, all the silver, and take care of their own people with their huge country of vast natural resources. They don't need the rest of the world as much as we want them to need us. So it'll be interesting. Putin's a smart guy. He knows exactly what's going on with the gold cabal and the gold cartel, and how the rigging happens on the COMEX and at the LBMA. So it'll be really interesting. If he gets pushed too far, he'll just raise his hand and say, okay, Russia's going to use the rest of their reserves to buy all the physical silver in the world. Good night, game over.
Yeah, and there's this report from Zero Hedge today. Russia just pulled itself out of the petrodollar. And the quote is, "Together with the central bank, we are selling a part of our foreign currency reserves." The finance minister in Russia said today, quote, "We'll get rubles and place them in deposits for banks, giving liquidity to the economy," end quote. It is interesting, just to circle back though and talk about Standard Chartered, you're saying some of the banks obviously didn't position themselves correctly. So I made the mistake when I asked you that question. It was a leading question about, well, the criminal banks couldn't have possibly wanted this to happen in terms of how it's affecting their derivatives portfolios. But if you step back even further and you realize that the top criminal banks, Goldman Sachs, JP Morgan, to speak of maybe the two top, and then maybe HSBC right behind, those are the deal makers. Those are the eyes at the top of the pyramid. Those are the banks that trade against their own customers. Those are the banks that front run for the U.S. government. Those are the banks that are the top criminal banks. And then, of course, above them, central banks. And then, of course, above them, the IMF, Bank of International Settlements. My point being that whatever is happening with oil, I bet in the future, as we look at who comes out smelling like a rose financially, there will be a couple that position themselves correctly. And my guess would be Goldman Sachs and JP Morgan would be among those.
Well, there's no doubts that in times of financial stress, the bankers eat their own, and sometimes they cause it just to get control of another bank.
That's my point. Yep.
Yeah, it's easier to double your size if you just swallow someone that's as big as you than go out there and do the real work and gain customers and gain loyalty of customers. Jamie Dimon was on at his conference call today, absolutely crying about the amount of regulation they have to live up to now, and the amount of the fines of their criminal behavior has cost the company, and they have 6 regulators on site instead of just one. To talk about a ridiculous criminal crying about having to uphold the law, it's hysterical. That guy should be put out to pasture a long time ago, and I think in the next crash he'll be one of the main fall guys for the banks to say, hey, it was all Jamie Dimon's fault. He told us to do this.
Yeah, well, how would you like to be a bank regulator over at JP Morgan? Is that a position you'd want? Would you want to be one of those 6 guys, Bix? It seems to me you might accidentally take a stumble off the top of the tower if you're not careful. Or it would be a little bit like being asked by the government to stand in at John Gotti's house and help him balance his checkbook. You're not going to be privy to the big picture, and even if you are, you better tread lightly lest you find yourself with cement boots.
Oh, yeah. Well, just look at the Federal Reserve Bank auditor that went to J.P. Morgan and basically tried to blow the whistle, and she wasn't allowed to. And now she's come out. I think there was a big article in it in Rolling Stone, and said, the game is rigged. Even within the Federal Reserve Bank, all the auditors it's who reports to the next guy up, and that next guy up is the guy who's kind of saying, hey, we have to go easy on these banks. It's just the whole thing is crazy. And, is there an end? There hasn't been an end yet. And will they get out of it? I don't think so this time. But to me, it's when will this time happen? This time will happen when the same thing happens that happened in 2007, 2008, when the banks stumbled. You lost Lehman, you lost Bear, and then everybody started eating their own, and it was mass chaos. I see the same thing happening, and I truthfully think that people are smart enough now and have learned enough in the past 5 years that they'll stand up and say no more.
Yeah, and that may be the case in the United States, and it may not be. But it really helps bring our conversation full circle. Will the banks be able to extricate themselves from this derivatives collapse? Will some of the banks survive? Will this system survive? I don't think it'll survive, at least in this form. It may have to evolve and become somewhat less draconian and somehow less fascist. Maybe I'm wrong about that, but one thing's for sure. Gold and silver in physical form are not going to be forgotten about as it pertains to those being real money, because the nation states around the planet that matter, Russia, China, Germany, nation states want gold in physical form because at the highest levels, it continues to be recognized as real money. The money it's been for 5,000 plus years is going to continue. This isn't like the internet bubble when it was like, oh, there's a new paradigm and everything's changed. No, sooner or later, everything reverts to the mean.
I agree 100%. And remember that if the derivative complex fails or falls or fails, that is the key to controlling prices on all commodities, the U.S. dollar, every currency known to man. They use derivatives. So if you take out the derivative complex, you don't have the ability to rig the price lower as they've been doing. So if the derivatives go away, gold and silver will finally be freely priced. What that price will be, I don't know. I can't see any bank, because they're so interconnected, any bank surviving the derivative crash of just a couple of the big ones. So it'll be a cascading effect, and you can't stop the bleeding. These derivatives are in the quadrillions, and they will take out some of the best customers of these banks that don't have derivatives, which will obviously hurt them, and they'll have to start selling assets. And they're leveraged. All banks are leveraged, 5, 10, 15 to 1. Even the very conservative banks couldn't withstand that, because some of their best customers will be taken out by the derivative crash. So it really is a cascading effect, and that's what they tried to stop in 2008. And they didn't fix any problems. Obviously, there's still many hundreds of quadrillions in derivatives. They just delayed the process, and when are they going to stop the delay? I thought it would be last year, and clearly they just flatlined everything and drove silver slowly but surely down on their computer program, completely rigged. And now the sentiment in our space of gold and silver investments is dead, completely dead. They've beaten the pulp out of silver investors to get us to a point where they think, okay, now we can change something. Now we can try to cover our shorts or whatever they're trying to do next. And I'm sure there's a plan in place. They're going to try to do it because the sentiment is dead. There's very little money coming into the sector, and it's a complete destruction of everything that we had hoped to get out of our silver investments, unless you just sit and wait.
Well, now sentiment is dead as it pertains to mining shares. I agree with you. But again, if we look at the record sales of Silver Eagles in physical form, sentiment is not dead. And I didn't even want to bring this up because I didn't want to rehash it, because to me it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter if it's been JP Morgan or if it's the common man buying all of these Silver Eagles. But I should bring up that Ted Butler article again. What was your stand on that? Because I thought his thesis was interesting, because when prices fall, the retail investor flees. That's just a fact. It's one of those weird market psychology deals. And it is surprising to see the price of silver plummet over the last 3.5 years and still see so much demand for Silver Eagles. If it's not you and me, you and me can't be buying tens of millions of Silver Eagles.
We're not.
And our listeners. So who is buying all these Silver Eagles? Because it's not my neighbors. It's not my friends and colleagues.
It's some big people. I call them the good guys. And it's interesting to look at the way the U.S. Silver and Gold Eagle program was structured originally in 1987. Was that all the Gold Eagles had to be sourced? The gold had to be sourced from the United States. You couldn't go out to Europe and buy the gold, or London and buy the gold and bring it back. It all had to be sourced from the United States. And if you couldn't source it from the United States, then you couldn't make the Eagles. The Silver Eagles, on the other hand, were completely different. And it required the U.S. Treasury to go out and buy silver at any price to supply the demand for Silver Eagles. That's the key. Now, that law was changed a couple years back by our corrupt Treasury. Now it's up to Jack Lew, or whoever the Treasury Secretary is, and he can make the judgment, and he has made that judgment, to stop producing Silver Eagles. But the original law was written such that the Silver Eagle program is the situation where the good guys can destroy the banks. Is that happening now? Yeah, I do think. It's not the retail investor. I don't see a lot of people running out buying a lot of monster boxes or silver rounds. At least the people that we deal with on the retail side. There are some very, very, very big buyers who are keeping that demand up there and buying. They got probably more money than God. And they will continue to buy and continue to keep the pressure on. And at one point, they might just say, okay, I'm going to go all in, and I have enough now. I'm going to drive that silver price through the roof. And maybe that's what Putin's doing too. It could be Putin buying. It could be anybody with access to a couple $1 billion, which is not a lot of money in today's day and age, right, to go in. And why wouldn't Putin go in and buy all the U.S. Silver Eagles? He knows it would piss off the United States and it put a huge question mark into how our markets run. If I were him, I would do that.
Yeah. Well, it's definitely deep-pocketed, well-informed, wealthy individuals and or banks, potentially, I'm going to do a video at some point here in the near future about a show that I like to watch a lot that mentions precious metals in almost every episode because it was a big part of the culture. And sure, it's a fictional world, but the quotes are fantastic. And it's Game of Thrones. Do you watch that show at all, Biggs?
I've seen it a couple times, but I haven't gotten into it such that I understood the silver context.
Yeah, you'd appreciate it because there's many an occasion where a character in it will be talking about his wealth and saying, I have my wealth, my body weight worth of silver. And, say a 160, 170 pound man, what are we talking about? 3,000 ounces of silver? I know it's a fictional show, but it's a fictional show that derives a lot of its roots through fact and historical fact. And in that show, they also have the Iron Bank, and the Iron Bank is very much akin to the Rothschild cartel, or even above them, the Bank of International Settlements, or the IMF type of thing. And I'm going to put that video together soon because I think it's fascinating. I'll put together the top 5 or top 10 silver and gold quotes from Game of Thrones. I think people will enjoy that. People might also enjoy your book. You have a book coming out at the end of the month, don't you, Bix?
I do, and I'm real excited about it. It sprang from the original ideas of Donald Walsh, who wrote the book Conversations with God. And it was a best-selling book back, I think it was the early 2000s it came out. He got mad at life and he started writing, and he started asking God these questions, and the answers kind of came to him. I've done it in the same kind of pattern as that book. Is called Conversations with God about gold and silver. And basically what I'm doing is asking questions that seem so complex sometimes, but the answers that I wrote down and seem to come through in this process made everything very clear as to what's going on, why it's happening, what's going to happen with gold and silver, who are the people kind of behind the scenes doing it, and more of a philosophical look at why it's being done and why we have to change it now. So I'm excited. It should be a number 1 bestseller on the New York Times. I don't know.
Yeah, from your lips to God's ears. And what's the name of the book?
It's called Conversations with God about gold and silver.
Excellent. And that'll be available, as an ebook or a physical book?
I think right now it's going to be a PDF book. You can go to roadtoruta.com and check it out come the end of the month. At some point, I'll probably publish it in a hardback. But right now, I just want to get it out there before silver starts going really crazy.
Cool. Well, it's always fun to talk with you, Bix. You've been a friend forever, and one of the first people we ever interviewed. I remember our first interview, and I was really excited to talk with you, and it's been a friendship that's just burgeoned over the years. So thanks for checking in with us here as we kick off 2015.
Hey, Sean, keep up the great work. I'm a big fan of yours and your site, and I go there for a lot of information, so keep it up.
Thanks, man. Well, we're all fans of each other. That's the key. We're all really excited about what we're doing and about truth we're uncovering, because that's what this is all about. Feel free. People can feel free to disagree with us about the silver and gold and physical form thesis, but I have a feeling that history will prove us right, Bix.
I know that to be true.
All right, brother. Check out Bix's site at roadtoruta.com, and please do check out our site at sgtreport.com and leave us comments. We truly value the community and the comments that people leave, the links that you leave, the news that you help us find that we didn't see ourselves. It really makes a difference, and we appreciate all of you. Thanks for listening. Thanks, Bix.
Thanks, Sean.